So the campus was located in that one single building, and the main pedestrian pathway from that campus to what was then called Brooklyn was 42nd Street. So that's what we were dealing with historically. This is a major east-west connection. And that pedestrian path went to a streetcar, which ran up and down University Way. This was ripped out in the 30s when the car took over. So from the 20s and for about 100 years, the University District was the major commercial center of all of North Seattle because we didn't have the I-5 bridge, of course, and the University Bridge was just becoming. So we've had a long history of being an economic driving force of the city. In fact, the second Nordstrom's is right there on the Ave. So now we are at a next change of our transformation into a very urban environment. We have what was during the pandemic at one point the busiest train station in the whole network, and now we're like the third busiest. Plus, we have 2 train stations serving our neighborhood. So this up and coming center is going to change drastically. We need to start anticipating what the needs are going to be for the people coming. We are expecting about 5,000 new households over the next 5 to 10 years. We have about 20,000 commuters every day coming up and down that station. And we have 1,000 people walking on the Ave every hour, which is perfect. It's right. It's a walk score of 100. It's great for outdoor life. So the train is bringing new people to our district, but it's also allowing people to go elsewhere. So we're in competition with Capitol Hill, with Roosevelt, with Columbia City. We need to make sure that we become a destination where people choose on the weekend, hey, let's go hang out at the U District. So it's up to us to try to shape what that destination is going to look like, knowing that we're in competition. So what do we have to work with? Well, we have a 5-acre deficit of public open space. We really don't own anything except the public right-of-way. So we're looking at the streets, the sidewalks, the crosswalks. So these are things that we can work with in our toolkit. And that space is usually that negative space that people don't think about. You think about a destination. You think about Magus Books. You think about, Cafe on the Ave. But you don't think about the space in between those buildings. So with our toolkit, we get a couple wonderful things we can work our magic on. We have the walls of the buildings. A lot of them on our street are historic. They're beautiful wallpaper. We can deal with the paving, which is like carpeting for the room that we're trying to build outside. We can control the lighting. We can talk about whether there's going to be a table outside furniture for people to linger and enjoy coffee or dinner. So these are the things that we have, the tools we have to kind of create the space where everyone is going to be welcome. We're trying to consider every single person that might want to come and what their needs are. Do they need assistance? Or do they come up on wheels? Do they bike in? Do they have a wheelchair? Do we need to have parking for the local businesses, pickups and drop-offs, deliveries for the businesses? So we're thinking of who the window shopper is, the outdoor diner, the student rushing off to class, and we're going to have a community of thousands who will start calling this place home. So it's up to us to shape the street and look at the precedents we have on Northeast 43rd, what was done really well, what would be done better. Places elsewhere in the world and in the city where we can use those as examples to shape this Northeast 42nd Street, 2 blocks, to fit what our future is going to be. It's going to be transformed. And you guys, thank you very much for coming, are going to help us shape that. So welcome and get excited, get your ideas going. I'm going to hand it over to Kevin.
All right, thanks. I got about 3 minutes, but I'm going to go through the background info pretty quick. It's all on the table as well, but the goal of this part is to make sure that we all have the same information and we all know what elements we're going to be discussing as we move on to the work session stage. So we're talking about 42nd Street and the Ave. We have the light rail to the north. We have the UW campus right to the east. And we have the Ave coming right through our street. This slide is highlighting the importance of this is a pedestrian connection to the Ave. It is, or to the campus. This the friendliest and nicest pedestrian connection off of 15th Street getting onto UW campus. And we also have a close connection to the new light rail station. This is looking at where buses, bikes, and cars are going. These red lines are the arterial streets, and this highlights that this is one of the few places on one of the few streets in our neighborhood that doesn't have buses going down it and isn't a major artery. This is the facade along 42nd Street. We're gonna look at the 1300 block and then move on to the 1400 block. But the thing I wanted to notice here is the variety of uses and the variety of buildings going on. We have residential, we have lots of ground floor retail, we have a church. And then on the next, you'll see we have a new building, we have old historic buildings. We have what will probably be a new building as well right here. Empty lot. So now we're going to zoom in a little closer to the street and look at some of the conditions right on 42nd. This is just to highlight that it is currently a project that's looking to install curb bulbs right at the intersection of 42nd and the Ave. So just we're going to keep that in our mind as we're thinking about what the future of this.
So yeah, you just said, Kevin used a little lingo there, curb bulb. So we're extending, you see the dash line on there, and that's what's on the drawing on your tables. And by the way, the packets have the same information you're seeing, so you can cruise through there and recall something that Kevin has shared with you. So a bulb is, you're extending it out, extending the curve to create a shorter crossing for pedestrians, calm traffic. So you're creating a better pedestrian condition by calming the vehicles down. This is being proposed by a project that is kitty corner to our project, the church that came down, and its new apartment building that's going up. Joshua knows a little bit about the history there. It's on the books right now. So it's at about 90% design. It's our opportunity to inform that design, if we can even at least do that, or at least acknowledge that it's there and something to work with. So it's just, that's what's shown on the drawing. And so again, ask us at the table going forward. It's not a platform. They're just curb extensions. So it's still curb and gutter situation. So that's a good example of something that could be cabled, and we can go through that later.
Thanks, Mark. This is looking at the buses and vehicles more on a granular level. So highlighting the street, but also highlighting that there's vehicular traffic in the alleys here. And then where are the buses? Buses here are coming down the Ave, coming down. We're looking at pedestrian and bike circulation. So there's a lot of this east-west connection on the campus, but then also the Ave right here, and of course throughout the neighborhood. This is looking at the current parking conditions here. So we have a lot of parking on the north-south streets in Brooklyn and for 2-hour parking and the Ave, and then there's much more loading, but also 2-hour parking on 42nd.
Getting south of that green on University Way, why is that?
That's currently the cafe. Outdoor dining. Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to spend a little time on this one. So this is bound to be a robust conversation about access for vehicles. So let's embrace that. Let's make sure we're defining what kind of parking use, not just say parking. Let's really define the use and the need so we can get more granular with that, because it's going to be a part of the plan. So let's be very clear about what the needs are from a business owner, from the community, how it's balanced with other uses of the street. So just be conscious of that when we get into that conversation. But I just ask you to be very specific about it and just don't globally say parking, because parking is a number of things. It's how we assign curb space, which Joshua would know a lot about. The city does. There's a full-time person that assigns curb space. So we can expect that to be a good conversation, a meaningful one today.
And then this is some of that more permanent infrastructure that also, as we get further along into thinking about what can this street be on a more physical level, that we'll be paying attention to, which is the utility poles that are an important part of the street infrastructure, and also the street trees that are there. These are objects that we would work around. And then this slide is showing lot by lot just what is the maximum allowable development on a given lot in our area. So these aren't going to happen immediately, and some of these heights will never be reached, because to reach the maximum heights, there has to be certain conditions and allowances given. But these are what could happen on any given lot. So for example, the currently empty lot there can have a 65 foot, but then some of the other ones can go higher.
And generally, what you see, the blue is up and down the Ave. This is the rezone that happened with the incentive zoning overlays. It's something that Joshua and SDOT are looking at with respect to Green Street. So parallel to our project, they're looking at Green Street incentives. And we can actually potentially inform some of that too with our decisions and work directly with SDOT. So it's great to have Joshua here as well. Katie?
And just for context, isn't it 65 feet? It's like 10 feet per story, right? Ish. Like 6 stories more or less.
Yeah. So right. So lower along the Ave, higher outside. So it's stepping, much like other neighborhoods urban centers do in our city.
Yeah, and the new building that was built right here clearly is in a 24-story building, so not every building will reach that maximum height, but this same zone that's 240 is where those towers are going up right on Brooklyn right now. And then this is one way to look at a street. We have our street plan down here, which is kind of what's on in front of you. And then these lines are representing the sections through the street. So we're looking at some different conditions. This is at Vineyard Church right here. And so you see that we come across and there's that drop down to where Little Thai and Korean Tofu House and those places are. And so this is just looking at some of the different ways that this street feels like as you're walking down it. So we have that where there's the drop down. We have more, this is by Starbucks and by Cafe on the App, where it's smaller buildings on both sides, right up against the sidewalk. Over here, this is by Magus and Professional Copy and Print, and then we have that currently empty lot on the side, and over here we have Eagleson Hall, and that's set back a little bit more from the street with some trees between the sidewalk. Do you want to
Well, yeah, so we are fortunate to have a fairly recent update with our standards and streets. So in, I think 2019, SDOT adopted their Streets Illustrated. So it was a remake of their standards. It's pretty significant. And one of the things that it does allow for is a curbless street. There's a couple of typologies on the screen. So it's a big advancement that allows SDOT from a standards perspective, right out of the gate, to do something that is very pedestrian focused, still allowing significant vehicular traffic through, meaningful vehicular traffic, I should say. So we're very fortunate to have this to work from as a basis. And we'll be going back to that because I think there's a lot of potential. It may not be curbless in the end. It could be a different type of curb structure. But again, there's a pedestrian focus on streets. Another thing I'll say too is about our street. A 60-foot, 66-foot dimension is very common in our city, especially in a commercial district. So it's so when you go and look at other neighborhoods of similar scale in comparison, I live in Ballard and there's streets in Ballard that are very much like this. But in West Seattle, Columbia City, around the city, there are similar streets. It's likely to be of this dimension. So that's a good comparison as you go and experience the city and see something you like and bring it back to the group. The next slide. This is an important one. We want to dream today and we want to think about program. This is an SDOT right of way, and it does have standards, and we have to be careful about I'll use the word deviate. Deviate's important because that's a term in SDOT. Once you deviate, you go in front of a deviation committee and try to fight for something like alternative surfacing, a different light standard, potentially a custom furnishing. So these are things that are non-standard. We have to be careful about that and pick our battles. We are fortunate to have a good connection with SDOT. Joshua is going to join us with all the stakeholder meetings. We have direct connection to all the departments within, from urban design to urban forestry, street use, street operations. All these departments are really important. And we'll inform you when we think we're getting a little too far off base. We don't want you to not, again, dream, but we want to think big, but we have to think about where do we want to actually put our effort in to make the street the best it possibly can be. And then the next one, and this is important, and it's relative to what you've seen happen on 43rd. 43rd is a little bit unique in that it was an SDOT project, but also had input with SPU from a maintenance standpoint. SDOT has very limited maintenance capability beyond standard stuff that you see in the street. Most of the time, a tree, the landscape, furnishings, they're actually maintained and by the frontage owner. And that's the way SDOT likes it. They don't like to be in the maintenance game. They don't have budget for it. I'm told they're working on that, similar to our Parks Department that has a annual maintenance fund through our levy that we voted on several years ago, where we have a park district that gets funded annually. SDOT potentially was working on that too. We don't have that right now. So it's really important for us to think about who's maintaining this. It may be that if we come up with a solution that's non-standard, that we use somebody like UDP to really be the UDP, sorry, to be the sponsor. And so it is something that we have to think about long term. What happened on 43rd, things didn't get maintained, and then they came in and maintained it, just at one fell swoop. We want to avoid something like that. We want to be active in the maintenance.
Now we spend $600 a month to maintain.
Yeah, so UDP, there you go. So there's a great example. So we have to think about the long-term care And it's not uncommon to have a community partnership with these spaces, and you do find them around the city, where the frontage owners or a group, an alliance, a UDP take the lead on that.
But it's money that's not going to the normal work we do. So it wasn't set up, we're just grabbing it for now, but I think we do need a bigger conversation with that about how.
Yeah.
How that works.
Yeah, so thank you, and that's why we want to put this out in front of, based on the conceptualization that we're doing now. This is just to go back and just talk that there are planning documents, and this is in reference again to Joshua and SDOT, who is leading an update to the Green Streets program, incentive program within the U District. And I won't say too much more about that because I think Joshua is getting off the ground, unless Joshua, you want to say anything about it? Okay. Yeah, very early stages, but they're kind of paralleling us in the second quarter of this year. They want to have a plan that gets adopted and informs incentive zoning. So it's a way to say, look, hey, developers, can you do X, Y, and Z above and beyond what is already coded in the incentive zoning program overlay? And so it's our opportunity to actually inform that. And it could be as details like setbacks, surfacing, furnishings, amenities that you'd like to see on the frontage of their particular parcel. So this is an excellent opportunity. And again, Joshua is along for the ride, and we'll continue to partner with SDOT on this.
All right, so now we're gonna quickly, these will be in your packets as we're talking, these precedent imagery from other streets that have done alternate versions of streets that are more pedestrian focused. I'm just gonna quickly flash some of these images and talk about some of the things I'm seeing in them, but then those images are for reference for you also as you want to continue the conversation. So these are some images from streets in Seattle that have done transformations. And so we have 43rd Street over here. We have Bell Street downtown, down in Belltown here. And this is by the Cap Hill light rail station where there's the Broadway Farmers Market. And so some of the things I'm seeing here is they've gotten rid of the curbs. There's opportunities for festival events, farmers markets. And I'm also seeing except on 43rd, I'm seeing parking on these two streets when there isn't a festival going on. These are some other projects in Seattle. We have 14th Avenue Northwest in Ballard. This one pushed the main arterials to one side of this large street section, and then has more of a park and stormwater infrastructure on one side. We have Pike Place Market, the most famous one in Seattle and the longest lasting, which has an interesting mix of people and cars and businesses. This is Oxenville Avenue down in Pioneer Square, which is open to, I think, just deliveries and.
Well, it's open to vehicular parking during the day. Short-term parking that happens, believe it or not. Yeah, in one block.
And then this is in Georgetown, where there's a table where they've gotten rid of the curbs just at this kind of complex intersection, and it allows this neighborhood to block this off during certain festival events and use this as a friendly pedestrian space with access to these businesses during those moments, and otherwise it just changes the crossing patterns, but vehicles are still driving through. A couple more from Seattle. These are down in South Lake Union. So we have, and what I want to highlight here is that again, they kept the street going through, but this one jogs the street, so it has a different feel as you drive through, and cars are slowing down, and there's some parking on the sides of that one. And then this one has created a much bigger pedestrian space on the north side where it's sunnier, and has pushed the cars over toward the south side of the street.
And that's Thomas Street, and it was used, I think, in the RFQ for this project. It's one that we've been working on, and it's due to be constructed here, maybe this quarter, maybe starting next quarter, and it favors one side of the street. But it was a way to pedestrianize something that still allowed vehicular traffic. It removed parking in this particular instance in coordination with adjacent business owners. So it's a lead up into Seattle Center, from 6th Avenue up to 5th Avenue and into the center. So it's really an extension of Seattle Center. That's the way we think of it. Not unlike we might think about the extension here, but historically, Corey was saying about extension of campus to transportation as we framed it here.
But one question, the 18-foot, I thought we needed 20 per emergency vehicle.
That's negotiable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I go back to Bell. If you go back to Bell Street, is actually 17 feet. You know, Bell Street's a little bit unique in that it's actually owned by Seattle Parks between the avenues. So it has a little bit, but still, the fire department, the fire chief will dictate. And a lot of it has to do with being able to get in there, put out an outrigger, equipment, relative to parking, no parking. We have no parking on Thomas, so that alleviated that pressure. So there's a negotiation. You're going to end up somewhere between 16, 17 feet and 20 feet. They always start at 20 feet and you negotiate down. So there's room for negotiation. And there's got standards, I'll say, just end on the standards. The new Streets Illustrated allow for 9-foot lanes. So there's a basis of going to 18 feet.
Just a quick question, is Bell Street one way and like this new South Lake Union one?
Yeah.
At the top, are both of those one way?
It gets a little complicated. So the South Lake Union one, I think is, I'm not sure if it's one way, quite honestly. I think it's two way. It's a yield street, which is our most common street in the city, mainly in residential. There's a thing called a healthy street, which Bell Street is applying. And I think it's a healthy street that allows for, you're supposed to restrict vehicle access. It says so. It's really business and delivery, but it allows for bikes to go two-way. It's a fairly complicated story, a background to it, but it has to do with the street type that is legislated. So it's a whole nother conversation, which.
And then just the one down, the other one that's not built yet, the 18-foot wide one, that's one way? or
It's two way, it's two single lanes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But something's more one way street, so it's a good point.
Yeah, and it's a 6-foot right of way again, so you can see, and it's an example, but you know, we have a unique situation with our active frontages that has a substation and some new 501 apartment buildings with retail. So you have to take context into consideration.
Yeah, none of these are exactly what our street is going to be. The point of this is just to show different things that are happening and different possibilities to think about. So these are some streets that are elsewhere in the world. Some are close by, some are elsewhere in different countries. And I'm not going to talk as much to them, but there's something in Kirkland up there, which is combining retail parking and pedestrianization. And then we see a lot of different surfacings. You see a lot of, in these examples, international. There's a lot of open space, especially emergency and other vehicles can go through, but it's very pedestrianized in some of those examples. Okay, I didn't stick to 3 minutes. I think I took my whole 15. Apologies. So I think we should still should we take a 5
Well, I don't know, just pull the group. Do you want to take a break or let's just keep going? And we can maybe answer some general questions. And then what the idea was is we can break down into groups and you might roll up and we've got questions that are on the table, on the paper in front of you, but we'll just go through some guiding principles. And then on the table, there are a set of questions. And the whole idea is that we're really getting this down and writing on paper or drawing things, getting ideas, talking about program types of uses for the street. That's what today is about. We take that away, we'll come back with several concepts to have our next stakeholder meeting. Yes.
You can say anything about a public art program. Is that possible? What are the values of that? And what set the 2 block boundaries? 2 blocks or how did
Yeah. Maybe go back to the plan. Corey, I'll give you the second question first, maybe.
Sure, the second question. So we wanted to focus on, this is a Department of Neighborhoods grant, actually fund. So we wanted to look at a small area, knowing that it can grow from there. We're looking to live infrastructure with the dead end on campus. We can go easy to the west. Also, we had a pretty good need right here because 43rd Street's already done. This has been designated a green street. We could have looked at the bigger scope, but we wanted to do something that's more manageable. And if we can set the tone with this one little choke point, then we can try to see how we can extend that later on.
just to rephrase that, conceptually, the idea is it's spread further. That's part of the change. And you want to do the streets.
Can you go back to the bigger?
Yep.
Bigger. That's right, Mark. I mean, yeah, so critical to, I think, the Community Partnership Fund through Department of Neighborhoods, bite-sized chunks, manageable. We know you're going to get it done. That's really critical, I think, to being awarded. And I think that was a smart move by the group. Bigger aspirations are to get, all the way to Roosevelt, and really make these connections. We have Green Street north-south with Brooklyn. That's a critical one. as well. So that was a nice bookend, I think.
That was, if I can just interject here, so we've done things in the past, we did the U District stationary mobility plan, all community driven, we did the update to the parks plan, we did the alley activation plan, these plans are sitting on the shelf and we're trying to activate on them. This project is different, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to a very targeted 10% design, because with that document at the end of this process, we can hand it to SDOT and the city, PCD, say, here's something that we, the community, thinks would be a really good project. And they can take that document and start looking for funding and trying to leverage it to make it happen. So this whole project is to try to start implementing what the ideas we drive.
Yeah, right. I mean, we were remiss in just saying the goal is 10% design here. So that's a concept, and that's what you saw with Thomas Street on the screen. It's now at 100% design that SDOT managed, and we were designing part of that design. We were the designer, they were the engineers and lead. So there's a similar path here potentially for the project. First step, 10%, let's get it funded, get it into the SDOT funding cycle or otherwise, and then continue the path with 30, 60, 90, and 100% build it.
And it will inform the Green Street update, so I think that will also dictate kind of how these Green Street network works in our neighborhood, and that's still coming together, so it's not.
Yeah. Your first question, art, we don't have art budget, doesn't mean that we can't consider art in a big way here. That has to be funded through another program other than SDOT, although SDOT, I think, does have an art. Program. Okay, there we go. Another hat.
So we should move on to our most important part of today, which is us telling each other what we want to have happen in the street. So I don't think I'm just gonna go over what the guiding principles are real fast. That comes from the steering committee. I'm not gonna read them verbatim, but I'm just gonna, they're on your papers here. One of them says that we're gonna create places for people centered on the pedestrian experience. The next one is to provide for the needs of local stakeholders and businesses. The street is gonna provide for those needs. Enhancing the connection between campus and the community, the neighborhood. And embracing best design practices. So those are the big principles that can inform our conversation. But then the questions are, I'm going to let each group go over the questions. So basically, it's like, what do we want the street to do? How is it going to provide for each of these things? So in our groups, we have the packets, you have the questions, and you have this tabletop with the map. So there's going to be a facilitator in each group to help the conversation go. And we're going to be going through the questions. And then if there's as many more ideas come up, we'll be writing those down and keeping those as well. The goal is to get what everyone is hoping for this street to do. And so next month, we'll come back with some drawings that are going to be trying to provide for all of those needs that everyone's wanting the street to provide.
Got about 30 minutes because we want to allow for some report back at the end. And so we've got Robin here too, our civil engineer, who can float around too, and if we got more technical questions.
Anybody have the traffic count from you sort of the traffic? It's not like activity that shows is basically the small streets and small areas. This is the major from quickly to coming on the app, going to the 43rd. You see that what's the traffic count? If you narrow the road, you kill the whole traffic business.
Let's have that conversation here, and we'll record that. We don't have the traffic count. I mean, we could ask SDOT to see if there are traffic.
That means it's not happening.
Yes. Yeah.
Many parking spots here on the street? How many parking spots are on 42nd?
Yeah, in your packet, we itemized that.
But I'm going to read out what is the street doing for us right now? Activity at businesses. There's lots of activity. Good access between the campus, pedestrian access between campus and the neighborhood and the Ave. It has a good amount of delivery and loading zones, both for businesses and for residents as they're moving in and out, or have larger deliveries coming to them. It has parking, which helps people get there. It's providing stormwater conveyance. It's one of the better ways of cycling between the campus and then through the neighborhood. It goes all the way through. It's a staging area for construction, as we're seeing. And these buildings need to be built, and the street is how that is happening. Okay, and then we talked about, then we talked about how can it better support the pedestrian experience and businesses. And we found that a lot of these ideas overlapped. The ideas of having more energy on the street generally was good for pedestrians and businesses. And so some of our ideas were, this is brainstorming, throwing lots of ideas out there. So maybe a covered space for when it's raining, so more pedestrians could be there. More strategy for timing, loading, and delivery, so that the space could be used differently during different parts of the day, during business hours, during restaurant peak, nighttime pedestrian hours. We talked about public art, about making the neighborhood and this space, but also the whole neighborhood being a landmark for the city, like the troll or Rachel the pig we talked about. How can we have more of that iconic stuff happening for our street, but for the whole neighborhood? Can it be more of a flexible space? So it's still serving all these functions we're talking about now, but you can easily and more successfully close it off to be just a festival space during specific moments. Again, that timing kind of idea. We had ideas for busker stations, making the crosswalks more exciting, like other neighborhoods have done, thinking about the surfacing, materiality to help pedestrians feel like that space is more of a carpet that they can walk across. They were talking about making it cleaner, dealing with the issues of breaking windows, graffiti, and litter that is currently happening, in the sense of safety, so that people feel safe being on the street. And then outdoor tables for more businesses to be outside. So those are some of our ideas. I probably didn't get every single one. And then some other things for what can we do for the neighborhood. They were kind of already mentioned, but for the whole neighborhood and the whole city, not just our street, that landmark idea for the U district, keeping the water clean that's going from our streets right into our waterways. Those were the kind of like two big neighborhood ideas that we had. And then we had some concerns. Concerns were mainly about, well, it's maybe a concern and opportunity. How are we going to deal with all this influx of new student housing? It's exciting for businesses, revitalizing, but also it's going to be a lot more pressure on these places to perform. And then construction impacts on local businesses was a concern that came up. And then making sure we're not increasing any sewer load on the water going out, sewer overflows or storm water going into the water. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Good. I'm gonna talk about different things and not just pile on to a lot of the similar conversations. I think one of the ones that emerged in the first question was, how can we make this have a destination quality of the street? That's the opportunity. I think you kind of said that with the landmarks. How do we do that? Kevin showed the graphic where there's really a gap that it doesn't have the buses and cycle infrastructure, but it has access to the university, the big juggernaut, all the students, and foot traffic from the light rail and the Ave itself. So how do we create that destination quality with layers of amenities, still servicing the businesses? Quite critical. We've heard that over and over, really fine tuning that and understanding which businesses where, so we can really be targeted with that versus overdoing it. We have opportunities where we can have pure public space where there are blank walls. There are businesses that don't have the same needs with the loading and parking. So that's a balanced conversation. Mohammed, you asked about traffic. We're going to pursue that with SDOT. I think the same thing is true about businesses. How much of your business is foot traffic, students with no cars versus somebody with a car? And that's different from the people delivering your goods and paper and stuff that you need. And all businesses need that. Definitely. So it's a conversation that goes both ways. The foot traffic is going to get bigger. We have an enormous amount of student housing that's coming. They don't have cars for the most part. They are very low. We're working on these projects. They don't lease stalls like normal residents do. We know that from our project work. So there's more foot traffic coming, which helps with the businesses, we have to believe. So let's just get that information and compare notes and understand that better. We talked about landscape, just the amenities within on the street. Lighting is really critical, especially like periods like this in the year where feeling safe and secure. and really helping attract people in whether they're moving through the space or inhabiting the space, and the types of lighting could be non-standard, like we see on 43rd. But Katie also mentioned we have a historic fixture, and if there's a push to actually do more with that, can we extend that into the side streets as something that SPU manages, or not SPU, SCL, City Light manages for us. Power to support events. Just think about infrastructure and how we support seasonal events where we can actually have a street permit to close the street on the occasion that we do that, like the street fair, to help, again, create that destination quality. So those are simple infrastructure things that we can be doing in the street, and power is one of them. We talked about seating a lot, a bit about just managed seating versus just seating that's unmanaged, and you might have undesirable things happening there. So it's been more successful. We have cafe streets and they're managing their frontage. So how can we actually do more of that and see very positive use and really a diverse range of people using the seating and feeling comfortable doing so? Because seating's for everybody. Thinking about, everybody else chime in here, but we talked about the university in the end, and the university about how we really tap into that. They do have a long-term aspirations to get ADA access up into Parrington Lot, break down the wall and create a space where people can gather as a true entrance versus just here's a way to get up into the university. They don't have it funded. They struggle with non-facility related infrastructure projects, but that is on the books, and I know that for sure with Christine Kenny University. So it's out there and coming. We've already done a study on it. That can help a lot. And then maybe there's an all-way crossing that we talked about, like you find down in Stevens. And I think that helps with the pedestrian safe and secure movement across a busy arterial street.
We also talked about very briefly the intersection at Brooklyn and 42nd, and how it's not a very safe intersection for pedestrians because it's so wide and it's just a four-way stop that people just don't stop at. So ideas for SDOT to like raise that intersection or put a roundabout or increase the signaling there, like improving
Curb bulbs.
that,
Like
yeah,
yeah.
improving that will slow down traffic in this corridor in particular and make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists too.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it off
Thank
to.
Oh, sorry. All right, for the last group, I think I have a few of the things highlighted, but I'm going to ask my team to chime in if we can. The gateway to campus is very important for us. We just feel like the line of sight with the mature trees on campus looking down 42nd Street, how can we bring that into the street to make it seem connected? And that's kind of like a continuing theme, I thought, is that we want to look at the visual cohesion of the space. When you're walking on the Ave, if you can see something that's attractive on 42nd, and we get you to veer off and go visit those businesses, walk by their windows, buy things, hang out in the street, and have that continue up into the alleyway where Allegro is. So we're trying to make that visual cohesion. So that's going to be done with the trees, with the continuous paving. We were looking at, the services on the north side of the street might mean that we can't put mature trees there, but maybe we can do shallower parts of vegetation. And whatever we do on that street as far as vegetation, as opposed to the more or less the open ditch on 43rd, we want to try to use pervious paving to make it more of a pedestrian experience. Parking, a great idea was that, we have limited street for parking, but throughout the day, the parking needs change. In the wee hours of the morning, it could be delivery trucks and maybe parking reserved for big truck coming in to service the restaurants. And then at the peak hour, Maya was saying between like 6 and midnight is when they really need to have the Uber Eats and the quick, drop off and pickups. She has people coming in from the east side just to her restaurant. So we need to make sure there's parking. So using flexible parking that changes throughout the day. So it might be a 1 hour parking spot for some of the day, and then it turns into a 2 minute or 3 minute. Another things we talked about were curating. So we have this space, we have these elements. Can we curate the lighting and make sure it's consistent so that people feel like I'm in one space, kind of like a U Village kind of feel to it, but in an urban environment. Some of that might be with paving, with making sure it's curbless. So if it just makes it all one contiguous, paving pattern all at the same level, that might be helpful for people with limited ability or access, and also give that idea of it being one whole space. What are some of the other things that came up?
I think we also were talking about outdoor seating a lot, and it's kind of married with wider sidewalks. And if you want to encourage more outdoor hangout spots, you need to make the space in which to do that larger.
And the furniture, got it.
And the
So
furniture.
wider sidewalks. So making a curbless might mean we have more,
Yeah,
more space. Yep.
I think the continuous tree canopy, like you said, is important to have that kind of iconic living room feel, having that feeling of the living room is important. Also, just that we have a lot of stakeholders that aren't necessarily at this intersection, but like the post office that use this corridor to get stuff in and out of. I think thinking about this as a throughput, one of the limited throughputs on our long blocks, just how do we keep what's necessary and then program the rest for people?
Right.
I think that access and back and forth is probably pretty important.
And probably one key thing is speed. If we can get cars to go at a slower pace, then all of a sudden now we can share the street with other users. So that might be the only thing, is access is still there, but it might just be at a slower speed. Anything else? Maya, Ray?
Maintenance?
Maintenance. Okay.
Mhm.
Did you want to make a point on that or just?
Just thinking about the low cost maintenance and think about the budgeting in the long term.
Definitely.
I think
Mostly
the
for vegetation.
I think the most important, like for the small business like Google Up and surrounding my neighborhood, will be like the flexible parking. If you're talking about too difficult to find parking, it is always difficult, so what to expect. But if we can have like the flexible, because by the time the 42nd will be like start the project, I'm pretty sure we will not be able to have that many parking anymore. But at least if we can like have some more dedicated parking, like for delivery or food delivery for like for 1 hour or 30 minutes.
So flexible would be a good thing. And let me just interject. So Ally and Dave joined us online, and Ally's just mentioning, this was a common theme, was can we uplight the trees? Can we uplight the beautiful old buildings? Can we create it to the point where it's like a museum, an outdoor museum that people can stroll through? And that lighting would help with safety and making people feel like it's made for them. So those are the key points. Leaving it back to Mark and Kevin. You guys want to take it from there? Next steps?
Honestly, yeah, next step. So we're gonna meet with the steering committee early next week to report, talk about what we heard from everyone. And we'll probably send a report back to all of you, to all the stakeholders of what we heard and what we're taking away. The next step, in about a month, maybe just over a month, we're gonna have another meeting all together where we'll have come up with some drawings with different ideas. So this was a lot of words. Next time, we're gonna come up with a lot of drawings. And then we're gonna be talking about those specific ideas, talking about how they meet the needs that we discussed today. So that'll be about a month. And then the one after that will be coming down to one idea.
So if you can attend all three of them, it's going to be great, because I can see all your ideas, you can see where you came up with them and where one winds up in the final project. So it's really great that you're here. Appreciate it. We're going to have more people joining us for the next one. And if you want any food, please take a look at that. It's going to be really large.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.